you, Blair, and congratulations to the network, to WA Landcare Network, for a very well organised event and well attended. So it's been a pleasure to be invited to speak. I'm in a unique situation in that I, since 2010, have got involved in the carbon industry, and I work for both a corporate farming entity but also a community not-for-profit entity. And the not-for-profit Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund actually started 2001. It was an initiative of Men of the Trees, who saw the then emerging carbon market as a way of them revegetating more land. So pleased to say there's still a very strong collaboration between now Trillion Trees and Charitable Fund. But the Charitable Fund had a challenge in 2012 when we were doing lots of small fragmented plantings costing a lot of money. We needed to do large-scale, low-cost corridor plantings. So we decided to privatise, and to do that we sold the brand name, the carbon neutral name, to a company called OzCarbon, who were a large private corporate carbon farming company with one major client, and that enabled us to do more and do it better. So since 2013 I've been involved with both, working part-time across both. And the corporate farming entity, since that time, has planted 13,000 hectares in the midwest of WA on degraded, unproductive farmland. And the charity, the Carbon Neutral Charitable Fund, has planted 4,000 hectares across 170 sites in WA and South Australia. So both have achieved we're proud of our achievements, and there's hopefully more to come. Climate change, we've been hearing about climate change for a long time, and a lot of people think that with the Paris Agreement, a lot of countries signing up to the Paris Agreement, with renewable energy, with electric cars, solar on roofs, and the Australian government, for example, saying it's 26-28% reduction by 2030, that climate change is being addressed. Well, it ain't, because whilst we might be struggling to reduce our emissions, the emissions are still in the atmosphere and building. So we've passed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's continuing to build. So the urgency is removing that carbon from the atmosphere, and that's where reforestation obviously has a natural role. And the CSIRO, for example, have said that and climate change is here and now. It's not something that's going to be happening in decades to come. It's here and now, because the CSIRO says that southern wheat belt land in WA has already declined. The winter rains declined by a whopping 28% since 1990. So it's here and now. And there's a cartoon, I haven't got it, but it's a great cartoon some years ago of a climate change conference, scientists on the platform, and someone in the audience stands up and said, "What about if climate change is not real? That means we've gone and reduced pollution, got cheaper energy through renewables, all for nothing." So that's someone like Tony Abbott would probably say that. Biodiversity is another factor that most people in this audience would know more about biodiversity than I do. But it's certainly a reason why a lot of companies and small, medium, large support the work we do. A lot of our clients are on the East Coast, and they support us because of WA being declared, or Southwest WA, one of the 25 original global hotspots, biodiversity hotspots. And there's a quote from WWF that says, even if the global mean temperature rise is contained to 2 degrees, which at this stage we're not confident that's going to be achieved, Southwest Australia is projected to become unsuitable for 30 to 60% of species across all groups by the 2080s. And that's a fact a lot of the community doesn't understand, so it's a real concern. Speaking of CSIRO, they launched a massive report, 40 researchers, 2 years' work in 2015. You can go online and get it. There's an executive summary, there's a full report. It's a powerful document, lots of modelling around addressing climate change. And they recommend that carbon farming through biodiverse tree plantings can be done on a large scale with a decent carbon price to fund it. If that happens, it'll have a significant reduction in Australia's carbon by about 25%. It'll assist in controlling erosion, address dryland salinity, restore ecosystems, and provide a new revenue stream for farmers. So it's a strong recommendation from a very credible group on the role that carbon farming can play. Essentially, it's a no-brainer. Here's a photo of Ozcarbon, who own Carbon Neutral, the private entity, which is essentially the sales and marketing arm. So Ozcarbon have planted 13,000 hectares in the Perenjori, Moruwa, Canna area on land that's been, farmers have, unfortunately, it's no longer viable for farming. And so that's an area where 97% of the region was cleared for agriculture in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. 97%. And a lot of it should never have been cleared, we know now, in hindsight. But it's images like that that get companies across Australia supporting what we do. Sure, they need the carbon offsets to reduce their emissions and achieve carbon neutrality, but it's supporting a project like this. And we are funded by hundreds of small, medium and large businesses. As I mentioned before, most on the East Coast. They value the work we're doing. And some of you would be aware of the government's ERF scheme, the Emission Reduction Fund, $2.5 billion allocated to that fund, but only 1.3% went into reforestation projects. All the rest went into landfill and non-revegetation projects. So whilst they're called vegetation projects, a lot of that is farmers locking up land and destocking. It's not actual planting. So this is an important point here, is that we don't just remove land from agriculture. So up in the Midwest, we are bringing sheep back into the system. We need sheep to lightly graze and control the weed burden and the fire risk. So it's an additional income stream because the carbon market price is not high enough at the moment to just live on carbon, so we need that extra income. But it's bringing a whole new sheep back into the region. And sandalwood. So sandalwood's part of our biodiverse mix, and we've excluded that from the carbon, but we can, after 20 odd years, get to harvest that. So it's a whole new industry, sandalwood nuts, sandalwood thinnings, and eventually the harvest. And of course, we've had a bee enterprise as well. So it's an integrated system. We're not removing land from agriculture entirely. Our Department of Prime Industries, or Department of Agriculture over here, do not support tree planting for carbon because they are very concerned that even unproductive land being taken out of the system, that one day in 20 or 30 years' time that land could be used back for agriculture. So I'm pleased to say that Ralph Addis will be visiting the projects soon, and hopefully he'll see how it can operate successfully in terms of integrating with agriculture. I think the department's probably scared of the blue gums, that some really good farmland taken out of production and all the blue gum companies subsequently going broke. We really need to educate the community about what we're doing, and delivering the strong environmental, social and economic benefits. So we're applying for some grant funding to measure, to put a value on those co-benefits. So there's the carbon value, but the other biodiversity, social and economic benefits, I suspect could be as much in dollar terms as the carbon. And that, of course, includes Indigenous involvement as well. And the WA government, we are lobbying for the WA government to insist that a percentage of the 30 million tonnes per year that the LNG projects are going to be emitting in the Northwest Shelf, 30 million tonnes of carbon dioxide a year, a part of that is offset with local projects. So the Chevrons, Woodside, Shell. Maybe just 2 or 3 million tonne, that would be a significant, have a significant impact on restoring degraded farmland. And also WA is a bit behind the 8 ball in terms of the other states with biodiversity offsets. So in New South Wales you can have a project with a carbon offset, and on top of that you can have a biodiversity offset. So they don't need to be mutually exclusive. And that's called biobanking, so we strongly encourage the WA government to look at that as an option. Corporate farming is large scale, 13,000 hectares. We've been doing 2,000 or 3,000 hectares per year. It's done through direct seeding, but we also do hand planting as well for some of the ewes, which are about 200 to 300 ewes per hectare per year to give us the carbon. And just as an indication, it's about 3 to 10 tonnes per hectare per year you'd expect from planting in the WA wheat belt. And so multiply that by 25 years, so you'd be getting about 150 to 300 tonnes over 25, 30 years of carbon at prices of up to $25 a tonne. A lot of the big corporates are paying a lot less than that. We're talking to 3 groups at the moment, one 250,000 tonne contract over 10 years and 2 others at 120, 130,000 tonnes. So there's some big corporates are looking to secure carbon offsets and pay that extra premium because they're supporting regeneration. Community plantings. The charitable fund has been working with Trillion Trees now for many years doing community plantings, peri-urban plantings and smaller scale ones in the country, so we're quite familiar with that. Some of our corporate clients like to get involved in staff planting days. But I'm aware that most of these regeneration projects are grant funded. I'm suggesting that the emitters, the big carbon emitters who don't reduce their carbon intensity, they are essentially fined by having to buy carbon offsets. So a lot of these regeneration projects could be funded by emitters, carbon emitters, rather than taxpayers. And the community activity also extends to the monitoring. So there's the planting itself, but then there's the ongoing monitoring. So there's many activities that the corporate farmers, but also community plantings can get involved in. This is a bit of a busy slide, but essentially it's saying that the corporate farmers have to abide by strict standards. They can only sell carbon as it's sequestered. So each year or each period of time they get an auditor to measure the carbon. They can only sell what's sequestered. Community groups, the charitable fund, has been for many years selling carbon upfront and unaccredited. So we abide by the standards, but a lot of our supporters don't expect us to just sell the carbon as it's sequestered. So there's a benefit there. The legal protection, we do protect our plantings, most of them, via carbon right and carbon covenant, but community groups can do carbon projects and buyers would not necessarily accept. That's a nice to have, but they wouldn't always accept that. Community plantings get a premium price of up to $25 at the moment, against as low as 10 or 12 for the corporate planting. So there's many benefits for community groups in terms of working with companies that want to work with you to do your plantings. It's complex. If you want to check out some of the complexities of carbon, look at these Condina Group, the business case for carbon farming, and the Carbon Market Institute's Carbon Farming Roadmap. They're big documents. It'll scare the hell out of you, and that's why it's probably groups like us that are happy to be to help, to collaborate, to be aggregators. Because of the many skills required, we're happy to share our information, but it is a complex area. And as an aggregator, we rely on people, marriage brokers like Keith Bradby, who put us in touch with probably our best project, one of our better projects, the Yarrawaya Falls with the Thompsons on the East Stirlings. So we rely on landcare groups to find land for us. Finally, to wrap up, this is a graph of the carbon growth curve. So as you know, it takes 25, 30 years to reach its maximum. And I'm suggesting rather than a carbon buyers just buying carbon, they are paying big premiums for revegetation activity, and there's room for plenty of players, and we'd invite you guys as Landcare groups to participate, either do your own projects, work with us, or help us find land. So pleased to talk to you during the day if that's of interest. Thank you.